All right, now many of you have asked for me to do something else with cooking. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do one more cooking video, and then I'm going to move these cooking videos to another channel. And basically the idea behind the cooking channel is a couple of things. One, I'm a very fussy eater. It is a real, I don't want to call it a phobia. It's more like a disease. It's a disorder, I think would be a more politically correct term. I don't like my foods touching. That's part of OCD. So I want to accomplish a couple things with the cooking videos. One, I want to show you how easy it is to make your own meals instead of just buying ramen or something like that because it's fast. It's not good for you. The second thing is I want to show people who are fussy eaters or have perhaps you have children that are fussy eaters, what's going on in the mind of some fussy eaters. I can't speak for all fussy eaters because there's lots of different levels. But I have this philosophy that if I like something, chances are most people should like it. All right. So what I'm going to show you on this video is something a lot of people, if there's anything I eat that I'm not certain other people will like, it's mushrooms. There are people that absolutely have absolutely no eating disorders, but there's something about mushrooms, they won't have them. And I'm convinced that if they would try mine, they would like them, but I could be wrong. So this is a sauteed mushrooms recipe, and it's very simple, and it can be made a couple different ways. And we're just going to try and get this done very, very quickly, just so you can get the gist of it. And of course, feel free to experiment with it, rather, as it pertains to your particular taste and experimentation. Remember, none of this is going to kill you unless you have some sort of an allergy to any of the ingredients, which obviously you would know about. I wouldn't know that, and even then it probably shouldn't kill you. But the food itself and the ingredients, even if you don't like them, they won't cause you any harm. All right, so with that said, what we need is a medium-sized frying pan. So that's what I've got out here, and we're going to turn this burner on and get it warmed up. Remember, we don't want to cook anything on high. The only time you ever want to use the high setting on your stove is if you're boiling water. If you're not boiling water, crank that thing down, probably about, in this case, I'm going to put it on 5, which is right in the middle. Next, I'm a butter guy. I don't want margarine. If you want to use margarine, or you want to use olive oil, or you want to use some other way to keep the food from sticking and keep the pan from burning, feel free to experiment with that. I like salted butter, and I want a generous portion. That's about a tablespoon of butter. And I want that to just melt down into this pan. Now for the mushrooms, I'm going to go lazy to make this video go faster. I use white mushrooms. These are already pre-washed and pre-sliced, so all I have to do is open this package up and dump it into the pan. It's a little cheaper to buy the whole mushrooms and cut them up yourself, and then you can choose which direction you want to cut them or how thick you want them. But keep in mind, these are going to shrink quite a bit. These mushrooms in this package are quite large and thick, but they're going to shrink significantly. So if you start with small ones, you might be disappointed with your end result because they might be microscopic when you're done. Now, I jokingly refer to these as my little butter sponges. The great thing about a mushroom is it'll absorb whatever flavor you put into it, into the pan. So by me putting this butter in the pan, I just want to spread that butter around, get that pan completely covered. That mushroom is going to take on the flavor of that butter. So what we're really getting with the mushroom is the texture, and this is what puts people off. It's for people who don't like mushrooms, it's usually the texture part. When you add butter, that's going to make it seem a little slimy. But you put butter on corn, and corn gets slimy, and people don't generally have a problem with that. So, it's all up in here. So for those of you with food phobias, if you're feeling brave one day, I'm strongly suggesting you try this out and see if you might like it. Now, I have changed this recipe over the years. I've been making this since I was a kid. The butter's all melted here, so I'm going to just go ahead and dump these in. And so back when I was a kid, I used to just put garlic on them and nothing else. And what I'm doing right now is I just want them to soak in that butter, so I want as many of these mushrooms flat against the pan as possible to soak that butter up, because that is going to taste amazing. Now, people are going to criticize, I imagine, that, you know, anything with butter tastes good. You know, you dip my shoe in butter, it probably tastes good, but maybe not. Depends what I've stepped in earlier in the day. I don't step in much butter. But anyway, you know, people could say the same thing about crab and lobster. Now, those are things I won't eat. But I think a lot of people, if they didn't have the butter to dip it in, wouldn't eat it either. It's like an excuse to eat butter. But I will say the mushrooms still have their own flavor. It's just that they adopt the other flavors really, really well. And what I want to let this do is, again, we want to put this down, you know, again, around a little below mid-range. I've got it about on 5. It's between 4 and 6. And I need a spatula. Let me get a spatula out. When you're using a pan like this, you don't want to use anything metal in a nonstick pan, or you will scrape the heck out of the pan. And, you know, if you're a kid watching this and you're using your parents' cookware, show a little respect. Besides that, do you want to be eating Teflon? I mean, do you want to eat that? So when you've got a nonstick pan, use plastic utensils, or the silicone or rubber utensils that they have that are designed for high heat. So you're not going to be eating that because it melted, right? So I'm just going to let these soak in here a little bit, and you can hear it cooking away. And what I'm going to add next, I'm not ready to add it next, but while it's cooking, this gives me time to explain it. There's an ingredient that when I talk to people about it, it seems like they're like, what is that? I've never heard of that. And it's called Old Bay. Now, it's amazing to me that this product has been around since 1939, and very rarely do I run into people who know what this is. Old Bay is traditionally used on seafood and chicken. But a good friend of mine who is a chef saw me cooking the mushrooms using only garlic, and he said, it's missing something, and he went through my cabinet and he found the Old Bay, because I would use it on fish and chicken. And he goes, this is what it needs. And the minute he did that, now remember, I'm a fussy eater, so if this was an entirely different dish, I probably wouldn't have tried it. But he was taking something I knew I already liked, and he was adding something I also knew I already liked. So in my mind, I thought, well, he's right, I should like this. But I don't know if the flavor combination is going to work. Well, thanks to him, this dish is so much better. Now what's happening to my mushrooms right now is they're starting to brown a little too soon, so I need to bring this fire down to about 3 now, because the shrinkage is not occurring. And this is what happens when you cook things. How do you know if your heat's too high? If you cook things when your heat's too high, what'll start happening is the outside is going to start getting done and the inside isn't. And that's where you end up with like a steak that's burned on the outside and raw in the middle. That means you cooked it too high. If you're making bacon and the bacon is popping grease out at you, your fire's too high. I mean, bacon will always let out a little bit of a pop here and there, but I mean, if it's constantly just popping at you and you're getting burned by flying grease, you need to turn your fire down. Too many people, in my experience, cook things at a much higher temperature than they should be cooking them at, and then they ultimately end up either disappointed or not. The things don't turn out exactly as they had hoped. But let's get back to the Old Bay. Old Bay has been sold in a can like this for as long as I can remember, and they also now have it in a much easier little bottle like this. So bring these up and you can see those. And they're available everywhere spices are sold, grocery stores, markets, etc. When we talk about the garlic we're going to add, you certainly could add fresh garlic if you want to. What you don't want to add is garlic salt, all right? There's garlic powder and there's garlic salt. And this is true of onion powder and onion salt as well. We're not using onion powder or onion salt, but I just want you to be aware, if you're not familiar with cooking, these are two different things. Salt is salty And powder is more like the item has been granulated or powderized. This is like it's been granulated or powderized and then salt has been added. I don't want my mushrooms to taste salty. So we are not using garlic salt for this. There's other reasons to use garlic salt for other recipes and other dishes. This is not one of them. At Costco, they sell something called granulated garlic, which is basically an onion, garlic powder. It's an onion powder. It's basically a garlic powder of fresh garlic that's been dehydrated, and it's a little bit coarser. So, while my little butter sponges here are soaking it in, I'm seeing the fire is now a little too low. So 5 was too high, 3 is too low. I'm going to move it to 4. And we'll see if we can't pick this heat back up a little bit. I still want to hear that sizzle. And they really haven't shrunk much. But now that they feel, I can visually look at it and I can see they're wet now, the majority of them. There's not too many that are dry. And this is important because if you put the seasoning on while the mushrooms are dry, the seasoning is not going to stick. It's just going to fall into the pan. It's going to burn on the bottom of the pan. Makes the pan more difficult to clean. And it doesn't matter which of these seasonings we start with. For now, I'm going to go ahead and start with the garlic. I'm going to use the granulated garlic. And I'm going to put a generous portion of that on there. Now, some of you may go, wow, that's too much. But you have to understand this is still cooking and much of that's going to come off in the cooking. As I flip with the spatula, it's going to get in the butter, it's going to come off into the butter. It's going to season the butter. Obviously, you can put too much on, right? So this is very much something that you decide for yourself. And it's too early to taste it right now because it's got too much garlic on it. We'll have to flip it a couple times before we check to see if that's enough garlic. Now, while that garlic is on there, and the butter and the mushrooms and the garlic, they smell amazing. Now I'm going to take my Old Bay. I don't want to use this can because it's a little difficult to pour out. So I prefer this shaker, which just comes out like anything else. And this Old Bay, it kind of looks like, I don't know, it looks a little like paprika, but it's nothing at all like paprika. And I want to cover the mushrooms with this. I love this stuff. Again, I'm going to put a generous coating, knowing that when I flip these mushrooms over, I'm going to lose a lot of it in the butter. And I would much rather have too much Old Bay than too much garlic, and I would much rather have it all just be perfect. So here's what it's looking like right now. And what I'm going to do at this point is start flipping them over and getting those seasonings into that butter. And I'm not going to season the other side. I'm just going to season the one side and let that seasoning come off in the butter and let the butter do the rest of the work. And I know I'm not going to use any more garlic. I am done with the garlic. I should be done with the butter. And the only thing I might want to add more of is Old Bay, but I don't know that yet, because when you're cooking, it's really important that you taste what you cook as it's cooking, because that's your opportunity to make any tweaks or changes. So one of the mistakes I used to make when I was first cooking was I would just cook something and pour it on a plate, and then I'd find out if it was good or not. That's not the right way to do it. The right way to do it is to taste as you're cooking. So again, these mushrooms still have a little ways to go as far as shrinking goes. I'm looking for a certain amount of tenderness to them. I know some people that'll eat these raw. To me, it doesn't do it for me. I have no taste for raw mushroom. And this is about the only ways you'll ever see me eat mushrooms. I'll eat them on a pizza, and then I will saute them. That's it. And it's only white mushrooms. It's not portobellos, it's not shiitakes, it's not oyster mushrooms. It's just, I've tried many of those, creminis. I don't know, I don't know if it's an acquired taste, if it's part of being a fussy eater. I know what to expect with these, and these always meet my expectations, and that makes me happy. So I'm going to just take one of these out of the pan. I want to find a little one that isn't going to burn my mouth off. So here's just a little one right here, and I'm going to take that out. It's tasting over-seasoned right now, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a lot of Old Bay. There's other things you can do with these mushrooms. Sometimes when I have friends over for a barbecue, I'll make these as an appetizer, and my friends will want to save them to put on top of their steak. I wouldn't do that, but I understand, and that's great. You can use your imagination on how these can be used in other dishes where sauteed mushrooms may enhance other things, such as a steak. And let's see how we're doing now. Let me find another little one I can taste. Here's a little one. That's still feeling really strong to me. Now, if you go, look, I put too much seasoning on, what do? I've ruined it. Just get yourself a little more butter. And by the way, they do this with chicken wings when they're making buffalo wings, and the buffalo wings are too spicy. All they're doing is they're adding butter. And you notice when I'm using this knife, I'm being very careful not to hit the bottom of the pan with the knife, because again, I don't want to scratch up the pan. I don't want to eat Teflon or whatever the coating is on there. And we'll let that butter melt and let the mushrooms get into that butter. I probably should have put 2 tablespoons of butter in there, I think. Now we're just going to let that soak. Let it marinate. Well, I guess it's not marinating. There's another word for it. But I can see that the butter is starting to bubble up there. I'm seeing the mushrooms start to turn a nice brown. I'm finally starting to see that shrinkage that I was talking about. They're starting to get smaller. Yeah, saute. Marinating is when you stick it in the refrigerator, whatever it is, and let it soak into a marinade to absorb the flavor of the marinade. And a saute, of course, is when you're actually cooking. So these are looking really good. Let's just try this one. They don't burn out in my mouth. I have to assure you, it is as surprising to me as it is to most people that being a fussy eater, I would enjoy eating mushrooms. I can't explain it. Oh, the other way I'll make these is I will make a tempura batter and I'll deep fry mushrooms with no seasoning at all. The seasoning's in the batter, and I will put the Old Bay in a tempura batter, which is really, really simple to make, and I use it with beer instead of water just to give it a little more flavor. Obviously, that's not as healthy for you, but this feels about right here. So now that we have this done, let me just see if I can give you a better view. That looks pretty well done. That's the look I'm looking for. And we'll just dump that. Let's just dump that right out onto the plate. Here I've got a few little stragglers hanging on. There we go. And we'll just set that aside, and we'll set our little mess aside. We'll grab a fork. And this is what I'm talking about. And I wish I could give you all a taste. I really do. They're still really hot. I don't care. That one still had a little too much seasoning on it. But it's the Old Bay I'm tasting mostly. I really don't taste the garlic. And this Old Bay and garlic mixture works really good on like flaky whitefish like cod. If you put butter on the cod along with the granulated garlic and the Old Bay, cover it with foil, stick it in the oven. Such good fish, and it's good for you. It's healthy. French fries. You can make your own French fries, which I'll do a video on. Instead of covering them with salt, use Old Bay and garlic. And I realize you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, it's all the same flavor. But it isn't. This doesn't taste like a potato. This doesn't taste like cod. This tastes like a mushroom. So even though it has that familiar Old Bay garlic combo that I like, it's still different enough to justify using that same spice combo on other dishes. And forget about chicken. I mean, geez, with chicken you can do something else entirely with Old Bay, but that's a more advanced thing. But you can see this was a very easy dish to make, and it's just absolutely delicious. It also helps that whatever day you buy the mushrooms, hopefully you cook them within 2 days, and preferably you make them the same day. The fresher the mushrooms are, the better. I have to say, there's something about the texture of a mushroom. And the thicker it is, like you see how, that one's got 2 attached to it. You see how thick this one is? Somehow that's more, for me personally, it's got more texture. The way it crunches, the way it feels in the mouth is much more amplified the thicker it is. But like everything else, there are some that can be just too thick. And then of course you've got little thin ones, and those have a much lighter texture. Anyway, try it and see for yourself. Feel free to, if you don't like white mushrooms, if you like different kinds, try it. If you don't like the garlic or you don't like the Old Bay, just do it in butter and salt. I think that's how I initially started, was just butter and salt. But it's always been the white mushrooms for me. But I will say that, I just want to encourage you to, when you look at how much, a lot of people right now today, at least here in America, they're buying a lot of processed foods. They're prepackaged, you stick it in a microwave, you go. Especially if you're a gamer, you're a teenager, young kid, you just want something quick. Well, this may take a little bit longer, but it's so unique and it's so different. And the idea that you made it yourself, and it's so good. I mean, you cannot buy this at any restaurant or store that I've ever been in. This is something, if you want it, you're going to have to make it. So I'd love to see your photos. If any of you try this, please take a photo of it and share it on my Facebook page and let me know what you thought. Until then, this has been Cooking with Kerry, and I'll see you next time. My mushrooms are getting cold. I gotta go. Bye. You want a mushroom? No, take it nice. Good boy. I'll give you another one. Set. Yeah, that's my boy. Right, the rest of mine go away. Oh, come on, you know I'm not gonna sit here and let you make you watch me eat this. There you go. Hurry up, make sure that plate's clean. I gotta use it again. One final note for those of you who are paying really close attention. Yes, I did turn the stove off. It's a good idea to make sure when you're done cooking, you move the pan away from the heat and turn the stove off. So I didn't want you to worry about that. I got it covered.